Hello, 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 and welcome to this stream. Um, in this stream, we're going to be doing a purple teaming workshop, and so I'd like you to join me and have lots of fun and learning. The purple teaming workshop is going to happen soon, but until it does, let me just explain a little bit about what that means and what this is and what you can learn with me here today. So firstly, the workshop's by Pwn Lab, so we're going to be taught by the instructors over there. I have no idea, aside from that fact, what it's going to be about. All I know is that they make pretty good content and training services, so it should be pretty good. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about purple teaming. So what is purple teaming? So in security, we have a red team and we have a blue team. And the red team tries to attack the company whilst the blue team tries to defend it. And so a purple team, as you could imagine, does both. Um, actually, I retract that. A purple team facilitates both. Or rather, a purple team, a successful, effective purple team, takes what the red team is doing and facilitates the dynamic between the red team and the blue team throughout the engagement, before the engagement, and after the engagement. This means, authoring and producing a very nuanced methodology of tracking communication, facilitation of entry point. If it's like a physical penetration test, which glass door is the best to allow the red team to break into in order to sufficiently and effectively, test the parameters in terms of security and things like that. And even at the end, when the blue team needs to learn things that they haven't implemented, which caused the engagement to be successful, the purple team trains and teaches the blue team, or at least um, that's what the up to date purple teams are doing, from what I've gathered. Like Hack the Box, the largest training platform. What the heck? Hack the Box, the largest training platform. I spoke to them about um, purple teaming as well because I was looking for teaming training. So I got an appointment with Hack the Box, and I spoke to their team, and they told me that the purple teaming training the purple teaming training that they provide is only for major organizations and governments. And with that in mind, I was like, hey, can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, what is that? What are you guys doing with them? And they told me like the process, which is such an effective and huge process. They're taking up to half a year with their clients just to make sure that in every step of the way, those blue teams are getting effectively trained. And instead of focusing on just facilitating an engagement and just providing a middleman between the blue team and the red team, no, they took it much further, where throughout this simulated engagement with a tabletop, with immersive practices and immersive um, training simulations for the blue team, they are focused on completely transforming those security professionals throughout that service, completely giving them both in-person education, giving them both in-person demos and real-life applications of attacks and things like that, as well as providing them with labs to do. Because of their huge platform, they're capable of giving those blue teams and giving those security professionals specific labs that they can use to work on in relation to the portion of the engagement. And so they put that all together to, make such an effective purple team. Um, so yeah, I'm not sure how much of that we're going to do in the workshop, but yeah, that's a little bit about purple teaming. And yeah, so this is a purple teaming workshop, and we're going to be doing an Azure related purple teaming workshop. So if you're not familiar, Azure is one of the top three um, cloud service providers. So we have Microsoft Azure, we have GCP by Google, and we have AWS by Amazon. And so Azure is one of these top three. And from my experience, Azure, the Microsoft's cloud service provider, is the most sophisticated. Now, please don't get discouraged. Throughout the workshop, I'm going to be explaining things from a beginner standpoint because I am still a beginner too, and I'm still learning. But I am able to explain it to you, and so it should be fine if you're completely new. But however, I need to make that disclaimer that Azure is tough. Like, I already finished. I finished my AWS red teaming training and I got certified. And then I moved to Azure and I found that Azure is just like AWS red teaming is a world in itself. It's a whole world. But then when I went to Azure, I found that Azure was like 10 worlds being called one thing. Like we have different we have different services that are branched out from different organizations of services that are all that you can apply all the Active Directory things on every single object and group and organizational unit. And so you got Windows, Active Directory, Azure services, common cloud, common cloud, common cloud functions, and services and cloud services and virtual machines and then on-prem machines. That's another thing where on with my AWS training, I haven't a single time needed to learn specific lateral movements between on-prem and AWS. There are no special associations between them, and thus the lateral movement between them is not unique to their dynamic or relationship. Whereas in Azure, um, like it's almost common where the attack path involves some lateral movement between an on-prem Windows host and then back and then forth, and it's just a um, it's just a completely different world. Azure red teaming. So so yeah, this is a purple teaming workshop. Now, what's the point of this workshop if we're all red teaming? I mean, if you're not red teaming, by the way, I apologize, but I mean, if you're not red teaming, you gotta think about that, man. Like, I don't know what you're doing, but it is great to have defenders. I mean, if you guys didn't exist, then we wouldn't be able to red team. But what is the point of purple teaming? What is the point of learning, all sides if you're red teaming? Why would I learn blue team stuff? Well, not only is it so necessary to the point where the instructors for red teaming training in the boot camps that I attended specifically assign and require labs from the blue team. That's how necessary they think it is. Not only that, but as a red teamer, we have the specific mindset of deception, evasion, and critical thinking in awareness to the opposition. So with these three things, We are able to do things like get around antivirus, get around EDR. We are able to do things like plan ahead, plan in accordance with how the blue team will act, how they act, what we know about the users, what we know about the workers, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do. These things don't just um, don't just encompass human behavior. They are integrated in what the machines themselves are allowed to do. Like if you tell a human, if you tell staff that you're not allowed to do such and so thing on your computer, well, there's probably some sort of measure being scripted to all computers through Active Directory or whatever it is that could prevent them in some way to do those things. And so red teaming is not just about attacking machines. It's about attacking the human behavior integrated system that is the entire company. And so within that system, there's a blue team, and that blue team regulates a lot of the things that you're allowed to do. And so understanding how the blue team behaves and what they can do is critical. And that's not only why I did some blue teaming labs. Specifically, I like to do the blue teaming labs involve um, that involve and incident response and log analysis. And this is specifically because for me, when I was going through my training and I was doing my red teaming labs, I came across logs a lot of times. Like I would come across logs like, oh, logs. What am I gonna do with these? I need to find an attack path or something. Okay, maybe I'll just grip the logs. Like, let me grip the log for like password or something. And so I was like, this is not adequate. This is not sufficient. I just found a world of resources, and possibly they could have everything. Like these logs track IPs, they track hosts. That's a huge attack path for me to have the IPs of the workers or whatever they are. They track user agents and users. Well, now I know what kind of computers the staff is using. They show the usage of services, like how often different services are used, what services are being used. Well, now I can map out the entire cloud infrastructure just based on logs. And the best part about it is that I only made one API call. I only made one API call to that cloud provider in order to gain all of those logs. And now suddenly I have the capacity to enumerate everything about the infrastructure, the users, even their personal computers. I have information about just from being able to analyze logs with a sort of incident response approach. So this is a huge blue team skill that benefited me as a red teamer. And so with that in mind, I have high hopes for purple teaming, this purple teaming workshop. And um, yeah, before we get started, let's go ahead and do some prayer, and let's read some Quran, just as a little preparation. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله. ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون وأولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون. إن الذين كفروا سواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم وعلى أبصارهم غشاوة ولهم عذاب عظيم. ومن الناس من يقول آمنا بالله وباليوم الآخر وما هم بمؤمنين. يخادعون الله والذين آمنوا وما يخدعون إلا أنفسهم وما يشعرون. في قلوبهم مرض فزادهم الله مرضا ولهم عذاب أليم بما كانوا يكذبون. وإذا قيل لهم لا تفسدوا في الأرض قالوا إنما نحن مصلحون. ألا إنهم هم المفسدون ولكن لا يشعرون. وإذا قيل لهم آمنوا كما آمن الناس قالوا أنؤمن كما آمن السفهاء. ألا إنهم هم السفهاء ولكن لا يعلمون. وإذا لقوا الذين آمنوا قالوا أنو قالوا آمنا قالوا آمنا وإذا خلوا إلى شياطينهم قالوا قالوا إنا معكم إنما نحن مستهزئون الله يستهزئ بهم الله يستهزئ بهم ويمدهم في طغيانهم يعمهون أولئك الذين اشتروا الضلالة بالهدى اشتروا الضلالة بالهدى فما ربحت تجارتهم وما كانوا مهتدين. Chapter 21. The Prophets. Al-Anbiya. Like the previous chapter, this is another Meccan chapter that aims at reassuring the Prophet by reminding him of God's grace and support to his prophets, including Abraham, Job, Jonah, Zechariah, and Jesus. The Prophet is said to be sent as a mercy to the whole world. Warnings of the horrors of Judgment Day are dispersed throughout the chapter and carried over to the next chapter. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. The time of people's judgment has drawn near, yet they are heedlessly turning away. Whatever new reminder comes to them from their Lord, they only listen to it jokingly, with their hearts totally distracted. The evildoers would converse secretly, saying, "Is this one not human, like yourselves? Would you fall for this witchcraft, even though you can clearly see?" The prophet responded, "My Lord fully knows every word spoken in the heavens and in the earth, for he is the all-hearing, all-knowing." Yet they say, "This Quran is a set of confused dreams." No, he has fabricated it. No, he must be a poet. So let him bring us a tangible sign like those prophets sent before. Not a single society we destroyed before them ever believed after receiving the signs. Will these pagans then believe? We did not send messengers before you, O Prophet, except mere men inspired by us. If you polytheists do not know this already, then ask those who have knowledge of the scriptures. We did not give the messengers supernatural bodies that did not need food, nor were they immortal. Then we fulfilled our promise to them, saving them along with whoever we willed, and destroying the transgressors. We have surely revealed to you a book, in which there is glory for you. Will you not then understand? Imagine how many societies of wrongdoers we have destroyed, raising up other people after them. When When the wrongdoers sensed the arrival of our torment, they started to run away from their cities. They were told, "Do not run away. Return to your luxuries and your homes, so you may be questioned about your fate." They cried, "Woe, woe to us! We have surely been wrongdoers." They kept repeating their cry until we mowed them down, leaving them lifeless. We did not create the heavens and the earth and everything in between for sport. We had intended to take some amusement. Had we intended to take some amusement, we could have found it. We could have found it in our presence, if that had been our will. In fact, we hurl the truth against falsehood, leaving it crushed, and it quickly vanishes. Woe and woe be to you for what you claim, and woe be to you for what you claim. And the footnote says that God has a partner or that he has any children. And woe be to you for what you claim. To him, to him belong all those in the heavens and the earth, and those nearest to him are not too proud to worship him, nor do they tire. They glorify him day and night, never wavering. So there is 10 minutes left before the workshop starts. So I'm going to make a quick coffee and I'll be right back.
Amazing.
So here we are, it's getting started now.
Let's give a few more minutes for people to arrive, and you can see my screen as well.
No, we can't. I can't see your screen.
Ooh, that's tough. Hey Ian, I just wanted to let you know that the maximum amount of users have joined the stream, so we can't join it.
Yeah, you can see it now. Okay, perfect.
Hello.
For Azure privilege escalation, and we'll get hands-on with that. The general idea is that I will kind of do a demo, and then you can do the hands-on as well. I will provide the slides after the session as well, so you can kind of go through the slides on your own if you wish to. You can also, we will also look into how we can detect malicious activity using Sentinel, how we can evade detection, and also gain persistence in Azure and M365, how we can harden Azure against ransomware attacks. This is something that is very important. As defenders and as penetration testers, we'll look to identify those risks for our clients. And we'll then do an overview of some of the boot camps and certifications that we offer at Pwn Labs. And then we'll do a fun capture the flag at the end. So we might run over a little bit, but that's okay. Yeah. So just to really quickly mention, I guess probably you have seen already, but we have Pwn Cloud OS. This is quite a new, exciting thing. It's a kind of Purple Team cloud-focused Linux distribution for AWS, Azure, and GCP. So as you're going through some Pwn Labs trainings, maybe labs or whatever, or whether it's you need a steady, smooth OS that comes preloaded with various tools for real life engagements, this hopefully will be useful. And any feedback, just let us know in the Pwn Cloud OS channel. Bilbo Laggins, what's the password to enter? You should just be able to click on the link, mate, and it should just let you in. Okay, so let's get started. Just to give folks a bit of an overview who may not have experienced this, who may not be familiar with Azure before. Azure was launched in 2010, and there are now over 200 Azure services, and it is gaining market share. So AWS has been around for a bit longer. They kind of they made the market and grew the market, and obviously have the largest market share accordingly. Microsoft joined a little bit later, but have been playing catch up. Microsoft's market share keeps on growing every year. Actually, truth be told, so does the market share for AWS and Google. What seems to be happening is that the top three are consolidating their market share at the expense of the long tail of other cloud services that are reducing slightly. So to give an overview of Azure, Azure offers software as a service, SaaS, infrastructure as a service, and also platform as a service. They also offer security as a service, arguably, with unlockable security features. Now, you know, I'm not saying that Azure should be all Azure security features should be free, but it would be nice maybe if some more security features were available by default instead of having to unlock them, I guess. Azure is a natural choice for many companies who have on-premises Active Directory environments. And so if they're looking to adopt any sort of hybrid cloud architecture, then Azure really is a natural choice because of the easy interoperability and kind of, you know, the vendor that they're already working with also. So infrastructure as a service, this lets you manage the data and configuration, the application code, the scaling, the runtime, and operating system. An example of this will be Azure Virtual Machines. With Platform as a service, you manage the data and configuration, the application code, and the scaling, but not the operating system. And so an example of that is Azure Content Delivery Network. And then with software as a service, you manage the data and configuration. And an example of that, for example, would be Microsoft 365. So to give a bit of an overview of how we authenticate and some of the important concepts, one is Microsoft Entra ID, which used to be called Azure AD. You may be familiar with Active Directory in on-premises environments, and Azure AD and now Microsoft Entra ID are kind of the cloud Active Directory, I suppose, for lack of a better description. Microsoft Entra ID handles the identity in Azure and underpins the identity for all of M365 as well. Then there's also Azure RBAC, and that is role-based access control. So RBAC is more for Azure resources. Yeah. So Entra ID identities such as users or service principals or managed identities are authenticated using conditional access policies and then authorized to access resources via assigned Microsoft Entra or Azure RBAC role-based access control roles. So the high-level flow is that these identities must satisfy authentication conditions. For example, they need to have MFA configured, or they need to log in from certain network ranges or managed devices. They will then receive permissions assignments, and these permissions will be scoped to a particular level. So, for example, an Azure Key Vault, a resource group, or maybe even at the entire subscription level. That's kind of how that's kind of how the permissions are assigned. In terms of how we interact with the Microsoft Cloud, obviously many of you will be aware of this already. This is really just an intro to recap for folks who may not be as familiar with these concepts. So when interacting with the Microsoft Cloud, you have the resource-centric Azure, and then the people-centric M365 and Entra ID. So to access Azure, we use the Resource Manager API, and some tools that we can use to interact with this API include PowerShell, invoke REST method if we want to send native API calls, the Azure AD PowerShell module, and also the Azure client. And the actual URL for this API is management.azure.com. For the people-centric Microsoft Graph API, we can interact with this using the Microsoft Graph PowerShell SDK, MG Graph. We can again use the Azure client. Actually, truth be told, we can also use the Azure AD PowerShell module. It has some functionality for Entra ID as well. We can use the CLI for Microsoft 365. So the folks at Microsoft and in the community have put together an unofficial CLI for Microsoft 365 that you can check out as well. And also it's worth noting still, we've got about 4 months where we can still use Azure AD and MS Online PowerShell modules, or rather the API endpoints, with these endpoints really being officially deprecated. Actually, that's not correct. It's not March. I think it's been extended to, it was deprecated in 2024 in March, but will be officially retired in June this year. And so the APIs will just stop working. Actually, I think between now and June, there's going to be some intermittent service interruption to those APIs as well. But they are still useful for us for various reasons. For example, they might help us with enumerating conditional access policies, stuff like that. And the URL or the API for this is graph.microsoft.com. Okay, we're going to go over tokens a little bit in the hands-on session, and so it's kind of worth getting familiar with that. So we'll do that in a little bit. I think the next slide covers tokens. But for now, we'll kind of revisit Entra ID versus Azure Resource Manager roles. Entra ID includes some predefined roles such as global administrator and user administrator that are focused on identity and access management at the tenant level. We also have ARM roles used in Azure that are used to manage access to Azure resources. These roles are defined by Azure Role-Based Access Control, or RBAC, and include some predefined roles such as owner, storage blob data reader, contributor, reader, etc. Yeah, these RBAC roles, as mentioned previously, can be assigned at various scopes, such as the subscription, management group, resource group, or a specific resource level. I see in the channel there's a slight echo from my end. I don't actually think I'm connected to the I don't think I'm connected to the live session voice channel. So if need be, I can just try and use the MacBook mic. No echo for some people. Okay. Okay. All right. So kind of every 30 minutes or so, we're gonna just pause and take a few questions. And yeah, we'll make use of the Discord channel as well instead of Zoom. It's just a bit better with sharing files and stuff like that.
Using a fine needle, the doctor.
Okay, so in traditional on-premises environments, we may be familiar with NT hashes, NTLM hashes rather. But in the cloud, we more so use tokens, specifically JSON web tokens. Azure uses this industry standard for validating claim assertions and for granting access to resources. So access tokens grant access to a protected resource, such as an API, the Microsoft Graph API that we saw earlier. They act as a proof of authorization, but not authentication. Access tokens begin with the format EY. On the other hand, refresh tokens are used to obtain a new refresh and access token when the current access token has expired or is about to expire, without requiring the user to go through another login process. And refresh tokens start with 1.a. They used to start with 0.a. And we can examine a refresh token also using jwt.io. So let me just get a new thing here. There we go. So we can go to jwt.io. And let's make that a little bit bigger. So you see here that the ORD, or the API endpoint effectively, is set to management.core.windows.net. So this is the Azure Resource Manager API. We see name, which is Matthias Lundgren. We see the IP address that the user sent the request from. And we see the user principal name, their email address that they use to log in there. And that's really the format of an access token. Instead of jwt.io, we might use jwt.ms. There's no reason really to use one over the other, I guess. They're pretty much the same. The nice thing about jwt.ms is that, for example, in the decoded token, you see an expiry field, and that has like a date time value. And in the claims tab, I think I've scrolled past it, haven't I? Yeah, in the claims tab, it actually decodes this to a human readable time. So that's kind of, I guess, one reason why JWT.ms is pretty cool. Okay, so I appreciate this is kind of a little bit of a whirlwind, maybe in terms of speaking about a lot of the conceptual stuff, but it is important and needed. So in terms of token types, obviously we mentioned there's the Azure Resource Manager, and these access tokens are used to authenticate and authorize requests in Azure's management layer, ARM. They are used when interacting with Azure resources through the Azure portal, the ARM API, the Azure CLI, or the Azure or the AZ PowerShell module. The audience or claim in these tokens is typically set to management.azure.com. Then there are then there's the Azure AD Graph tokens, which is the kind of old graph. And these were used to, or still are until June, used to authenticate requests to the Azure AD Graph API. And really, this is kind of like more people-centric resources that we can access there. Azure AD Graph is deprecated and in its retirement path and will be retiring fully by June 30th. The API endpoint or the audience of these tokens is typically set to graph.windows.net. Microsoft Graph tokens, on the other hand,
Basically,
are used.
basically, I'll give a rundown on this. Basically, you get the token, and then you just you put the tokens in, and then you start hacking everything.
Cloud ecosystem, including Entra ID, Office 365, Enterprise Mobility, and also Windows 10, but it's predominantly user-centric. So in terms of scopes, we have these different types of tokens, which are access tokens and refresh tokens. Access tokens are restricted to a specific scope that is defined when the token is requested. So, for example, if we want to access a key vault, then that scope will be restricted to key vault. So, for example, we couldn't use that access token to interact with Microsoft Graph. Refresh tokens, on the other hand, are not scoped in this sense. So when the user authenticates using OAuth, they acquire a short-lived access token, granting access to a specific resource along with a refresh token. When the access token expires, then the refresh token can be used to request a new access token for the same or for a different scope. And this is all without having to re-authenticate, assuming that the user has the necessary permissions for the other API endpoints. Okay, so I know this is just a 2-hour session, so I first maybe take some questions from Discord or Zoom. If you wish to kind of shout in Zoom as well, you can. I guess we can stop for some questions now before moving on. Masood.
Hey Ian, thanks for the workshop. I was just wondering, you mentioned that 365 as an endpoint is a part of the Graph API. So I'm just wondering, how could an endpoint that has a completely different name also be a part of the Graph API, or am I mistaken?
Could you give more context on that, mate?
Yeah, so like if you get an access token for 365, aka the endpoint that has Skype in it or whatever, Skype Teams.
Yep.
So according to your slide, the 365 is a part of the Graph API. So then that token, is it reaching the Graph API or is it a different one?
That'll still be built on top of Microsoft Graph, but the API is specific for that service. So you can still, like, for example, if you authenticate using Outlook, you'd connect to the Outlook API, but you can also use Microsoft Graph to query email messages. So it's all built on Microsoft Graph effectively. It's like a restricted version of Microsoft Graph.
Thank you.
Okay, so folks, we have a demo and you can get hands-on with this as well. And slides will be available also after the session. You can get hands-on with that. So in this scenario here, exploit RBAC for Azure privilege escalation. The scenario is that we have compromised, or we have really gained access to a service principal, and we are authenticating using a certificate. So with service principals, we can authenticate using certificates as well. So let's just get a session. So for this, we can use the Azure client. We use AZ login. We specify service principal, and then the service principal ID. And then for the certificate that we're kind of providing to verify our identity, that is provided there, that PEM file. And then we are providing the tenant as well. So let's go ahead and try and log in. Okay, perfect. And after this demo, I'm going to provide you with the PEM as well so that you can replicate this also on your own. So we see the tenant ID that we already kind of specified there. We see the tenant name, that the type is a service principal. What we can do is try to look for resources that we can access. So we can type AZ resource list and see what that comes back with. And we see an Azure web app named Mega Big Tech HR Portal. What else? The resource group is MBTRG12. That's kind of useful potentially. The region is US East 2. And we see it is a Linux web app. Rather, the operating system on which the web app is running is Linux. So what we can do now is see actually what role assignment we have on that. And we see that actually, we're able to see this because we have some sort of permission to the Azure web app, and running AZ role assignment list reveals that the type of permission we have is website contributor. So we have been assigned the role named website contributor. This is quite a powerful role that allows us to modify and change and kind of compromise the Azure web app. One of the cool things about the website contributor role is that we can actually use this to SSH directly to the Azure web app. So, for example, we can run AZ web app SSH, specify the resource group, that in this case is mbtrg12, and then the name of the Azure web app. And let's go ahead and try and run that. App is running. Excuse me. And that worked. So we have got SSH access to the Azure web app, which is based on Linux. Obviously, this is root. We don't need to run ID, but we can have a look at environment variables. Maybe one of the first things when we get access to a container, something like that. So this is what the root looks like. If you manage to compromise a web app that kind of looks like this, if you get command execution, you can be sure that it's an Azure web app running that's based on Linux. Whenever we get access to a web app or a container, it's really good to check for environment variables that may be set up. In the case of the cloud, there's lots of environment variables that are kind of defined that are to do with the instance metadata. And the instance metadata service running on, whether it's an EC2 instance in AWS or an Azure web app or an Azure virtual machine, this instance metadata allows, one of the many things it allows is to provide credentials to the instance to communicate with other resources in the cloud. And so this is like a really great way to move laterally, potentially, if we can use these, or if we can use this, some of this information from that are set in the environment variables to request an access token, and then we can effectively communicate as the managed identity that's associated with this app, if there is one configured, and speak with other Azure resources. So let's go ahead and see if we can grep for identity. So two of the very important environment variables that are set in Azure Web Apps are identity endpoint and identity header. And I know that's maybe a little bit small. Increase that a little bit. We see here that indeed we do have the identity header, which is a GUID value, and the identity endpoint. And this is always, actually on this one, the path is MSI token, which is slightly older. Oh no, sorry, it's not. There's various variables also for MSI endpoint, and the MSI endpoint will be removed in due course, but at the moment that kind of coexists with the identity endpoint as well. But the path is MSI token for both of them. The port stays the same. So in Azure Web Apps, the port always is 8081, but the last octet changes. So it might be 4 or 5 or 15 or something like that. So that kind of periodically rotates. The reason for that, I believe, is so if there is some sort of script or some sort of automated bot that compromises an app somehow, then the ransomware might be hard-coded for, let's say, .1 or 2, for example. Maybe in testing the payloads, then they had a specific IP, and if that kind of if that malware has that IP hard coded, then it may obviously not be able to request. It may not be able to get an access token if the identity endpoint has a different last octet here. So that's why Microsoft kind of looked to rotate the last octet of the IP. So to actually request an access token for as the managed identity. So various resources in Azure can have managed identities assigned, user managed and system managed. The idea behind this really is if I have a web app and it needs to interact with a SQL database or maybe some blob storage and save files or kind of read files, then it needs to have a way to do that. And in Azure, the way that that's done is using managed identities. So we can think of this as like a special kind of user that is associated with the resource that allows it to interact with other resources. So let's go ahead and I'm going to copy this because I'm probably going to make a typo if I try and type it. So, oh, not that one. Let's paste that. Okay, so this curl command, let me just fix that. This sends a request to the identity endpoint. So it is sending the request to this URL here. It is providing the identity header as parts of the header X identity header, and it's providing that value. It's providing the API version, which is the version for Azure Resource Manager. And this obviously is the Azure Resource Manager API URL. So let's go ahead and send that request, and hopefully we can get an access token back as the managed identity. And it would help if I probably typed it properly. So let's get that SSH session again. Okay. That worked. So that's amazing. We got the access token for the managed identity. It also returns information about the API endpoint that the token, that the access token is scoped to. So it's scoped to management.azure.com. It's an access token. It starts with EY. It has an expiry date, date time value that we can decode manually also using Python. Fine, so let's go ahead and copy the access token and then exit SSH. And then let's use PowerShell to connect. So we can use the PowerShell AZ module. So we'll authenticate using the managed identity access token. It has an access token parameter that we can use. Access token, if I can spell. Oh, actually, let's first just set the access token to a variable.
By the way, I outlined all of this stuff and provided a full template on what to do once you get an access token or creds and how to fully enumerate your access and get complete situational awareness. So check out the other videos on Azure pen testing on my channel.
Specific value, but in actuality, it can be any value at all. This is just an arbitrary value, but it does need to have this parameter. So if you don't include this, it's going to complain and say, hey, you need to include it. But the value once provided can actually be anything. Okay, amazing. And so we successfully got a PowerShell AZ session as the web app managed identity. So now let's do get AZ resource, which says, hey, you know, what can I access as this identity? And here, actually, we have access to a storage account named Mega Big Tech Internal. We have access also to the same web app that we just compromise. So this may not actually be too interesting, but maybe Microsoft Graph and kind of user-centric data is something that we can check instead. Of course, the name of the web app is Mega Big Tech HR portal, and obviously HR kind of relates to employees and people, and so it makes sense that Microsoft Graph, user-centric Microsoft Graph data might be set up, and so we could use that. We can try to get a session using Microsoft Graph or the Microsoft Graph PowerShell SDK, for example, to start enumerating Microsoft Graph and user-centric data. We will leave this as an exercise for you folks. I will now actually provide the service principal certificate that you can authenticate with, and also the command to log in, and then you can replicate that on your own. Of course, as mentioned, you'll also get the slides as well. So let me just quickly upload the PAM. Oh, I need to move it to my desktop. And there is the PAM file that you can use to authenticate. And this is the command. For some reason, it just says processing. That's weird. Let me try uploading it again. Maybe it doesn't like the pen. I could try zipping it, maybe. Let me try uploading the zip file. That's probably better. Yeah. So for some reason, it tries to scan the pen file or something. So, and then the command to log in is here. Okay. So yeah, feel free to kind of get going with that, and you'll get the PDF slides at the end as well. Okay, so the next lab that we're going to do together is to perform token abuse to bypass MFA. So we are going to do a demo on this as well. So the scenario here is that after successfully phishing the user Sunita Williams on a red team engagement, we want to try and increase our access using Microsoft 365. So it seems actually that MFA is enabled for Outlook. We'll confirm this now as well. But maybe there is a way to bypass this. So the objective is to identify some MFA enablement gaps or a MFA enablement gap and get an authenticated session using single factor authentication. Then perform token abuse to get a token for Microsoft Graph, get email and see if we can find anything to increase our access. So we have the credentials for Sunita Williams, but let's first see if we can log in. So if we go to Outlook and try and sign in, that's not going to help, is it? Right, what do I need? So the email of the user. So that is Sunita Williams, sunita.williams@megabigtech.com. It's a valid user account and we're prompted for the password. We have the password also. So let's paste that in. Yeah, and it says verify your identity. So we can use an authenticator app or get a text message from that mobile device. So we are kind of out of luck for that, or are we? So
Unless you hacked that worker's phone or you got a user, an admin user or an IT that can completely reset that reset that authentication, and then you can set that on your own phone.
okay. So check this module here. So we'll use MFA sweep to see, are there any services or Microsoft APIs potentially that will allow us to authenticate using single factor authentication? Not import mobile, import module, MFA sweep, whoops. MFA sweep, this one, okay. Then cat readme. So what does this say? So we can use various commands there. We can, for example, test a specific user against specific API endpoints, such as the Azure Service Management API. What we want to do is to check across multiple different APIs. So we can go ahead and do that. So let's, so that's the format we need. So invoke MFA sweep. And we'll put our username and password that we have. Sunita.williams@megabigtech.com. And then the password, which is here. And then hit go on that. So it says this script can attempt to determine if ADFS is configured for the domain you submit. Would you like to do this now? No, we already know that they don't use ADFS, so we can say no to that. It says this script is about to attempt logging into the sunita.williams@megabigtech.com account 10 different times. Do you want to continue? So effectively, we need to be super sure that we've got the password set correctly. So if we didn't know what the password was, or we got a typo in the password, that can risk locking the user's account out, which might be a bad day for us and the user. So say yes to that. We're sure that it's fine. And then it kind of goes ahead and checks various things. Now, we see here that actually the user is allowed to access the Microsoft Graph API, apparently, but if they try and access Outlook or presumably Teams or anything like that, which is based on the Microsoft Graph API, then we are prompted for MFA authentication, we need to provide an OTP. We also see that the Microsoft Service Management API is enabled. So this is kind of like for Azure and accessing Azure data, Azure resources rather. So we can go ahead and try and sign in using the AZ CLI. Now, a really good reason to use the AZ CLI is because on Linux, the AZ CLI stores the access and refresh tokens in plain text, which really allows us to very easily perform token abuse. On Windows, the access tokens are protected. The access tokens are stored in the MSAL cache, protected using DPAPI. We can extract these values easily as well, but obviously that just gives us the access tokens. The refresh tokens themselves are not stored in the MSAL cache. So if you kind of get valid user credentials and you want to perform token abuse, having a Windows subsystem for Linux or a Linux VM or whatever is definitely something that will help you on your engagements. So let's go ahead and log in. And that's amazing. So we see that MFA sweep was correct in terms of single factor access results. And by the way, we're using MFA sweep, but Find Me Access is another great tool out there, and that's definitely worth checking out, and that we will feature in future labs as well. So yeah, that was absolutely correct. Single factor access is enabled for the Azure Resource Manager, and we get a session straight away. The token for that will be in the folder in our profile directory named Azure. If we authenticate using the Azure client, we can notice that the directory will have a lowercase a. If we authenticate using the PowerShell AZ module, then the directory will have an uppercase a. It's just one of those kind of things to keep in mind. So Azure, and then the tokens, both the access and the refresh tokens, MSAL tokens cache, are stored in a JSON file. So this is not encrypted in the slightest. We can just cat it out, and we see the credentials there, which is amazing. So we can start using this specifically. You remember when we spoke about access tokens and how they are scoped to a specific service? So for example, let's have a look up here. That one is actually from Microsoft Graph. We've got a bunch of different ones. Yeah, this access token is for management.core.windows.net. So this is an Azure Resource Manager access token. If we were to copy that and paste it into jwt.io or .ms, that would confirm the audience is set to management.core.windows.net and an Azure Resource token, the Azure Resource Manager API endpoint. So for us, what's really interesting is that we get a refresh token, and this allows us to create new access tokens for the same service, but also potentially for any different services that we might want to access in the Microsoft Cloud. So this is really great for us to move laterally. So let's go ahead and copy that. And we'll just leave it there for now. Now let's go to token tactics. So one of the very kind of popular tools for performing token abuse is Token Tactics v2. So this is a freely available tool that's available on GitHub. It's based, it was created by, or really updated by Fabian Bader. The initial Token Tactics was created by Reverse Shell, Steve Bush. And yeah, you could check them out on GitHub. So these are effectively commodity hacking tools that are available to anyone on the internet. So we can move all the HTML files because they're not needed and remove the Python file. There we go. So, this is token tactics, and inside here we have token tactics.psm1. So this is the module file. So we can either dot source it and import it that way, or we can just do import module, which tends to be a little bit more reliable. And yes, token tactics has loaded, which is good. Let's check out the README actually before we carry on. So this module really gives us a bunch of commandlets, all starting invoke refresh, apart from these commandlets up here. But the invoke refresh commandlets allow us to use our current refresh token, which can be a refresh token obtained through Graph, Azure API, or various other services, and we can request a new refresh and access token pair for any other Microsoft Cloud service that we want. In our case, we're kind of interested in emails and kind of demonstrating impact or maybe increasing our Azure access using emails maybe, because obviously sometimes users can save passwords and sensitive information in their emails and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and use this commandlet here, which is invoke refresh to MS Graph token. So we can use the invoke refresh to MS Graph token to access user emails. The refresh to Graph token is actually the deprecated Azure AD MS Graph. Well, not MS Graph, it's actually the deprecated Azure AD Graph API endpoint. And so we just need to take care to use this one here, which is the new Microsoft Graph module. So we'll copy that. It expects us to put in a domain. So in this case, the domain is megabigtech.com. And then it wants a refresh token.
This type of vulnerability.
So refresh token. And let's copy that.
Are
So here's
legal
our refresh token
implications
that we got from
of
MSAL
this type of
token cache.json, which is the
What are the legal implications of this type of vulnerability testing on M365 Azure tenant, for instance? Before I run a tool like MFA Suite, do I need to get permission from the customer only, or do I need to get permission from Microsoft as well before performing these types of penetration testing methods?
invoke refresh to, then the variable name of the token is MS Graph token. So we can access the struct and access the all the access and the refresh token using this. Obviously, if you try and copy that, that's a little bit awkward. And so instead, we can look to get the specific access token value and just print that, which kind of prints that more neatly full screen, and we can copy that much more easily. Now, we can try to query the user's mailbox. So we want to download, to be honest, we don't need to download this. We can create this ourselves pretty easily, but this is something that's readily available, and let's check it out. So this is a Python script that queries this graph.microsoft.com endpoint with the path version of Graph API, me, so my messages, and it's selecting the subject and the body. It expects a token, so we're going to put our token there, and then it sets that as the headers in when it sends the GET request, and then it saves. What it's doing here is getting the data and then saving it locally to HTML files. Okay, so let's get our access token that is here and edit the exfil exchange email.py, remove the placeholder, and let's save that. Okay, so now if we, now if we run that Python file, we should hopefully get a bunch of emails saved as HTML files. That's strange. Why is it doing that? Let's just check the Microsoft Graph token value. So if we go to jwt.ms, oops, that's not the one we wanted, jwt.ms, and put it in there. And we, oh, yeah, okay, ignore me. I realized what I did, so just a second. Go to there and delete the .azure directory because I had an existing user in there, and then let's log in as Sunita Williams again. Okay, now let's go to, let's get the MSAR token cache.json file, and we have the refresh token there. Okay, super. Now we can go to copy that command. So the issue is that I actually had a refresh token there for another user, and that user doesn't have a mailbox, which is why it came up with that message. Okay, so this should be for Stanita Williams, the refresh token for Stanita Williams, and we're going to try and get an MS Graph token, which worked. Let's get the token value, and then we can edit the Python file again. So, whoops, not that one. All fingers and thumbs today. Exfil. There we go. Let's token equals that, and we'll delete that one. And let's try and run that again. Oh, it seems that's very strange. Why is it doing that? Oh. Yes, not that one. Remove this. Okay. So that let's go to, let's get the variable name again, which is there. Okay, so that's the access token, and it helps if I use the correct script. CD, go, let's fill. Okay, token equals that, and now we remove that token. Let's make that. Okay, so third time is the charm, and we want to run that script, and hopefully we get the emails for that user. Yay, which we do. So we have a bunch of emails there for Sunita. The kind of interesting email here, I guess, is Sunita admin .html, so we can check it out. And that contains credentials for the Sunita admin user, so we can move laterally there. So I will provide the login also for Sunita. And then you can kind of do this on your own as well. So we'll call this lab 2. Lab 2. I'm just pasting that in Discord. Okay.
Incredible. Oh man.
So yeah, that is how we saw how token abuse is a very effective technique to bypass MFA enablement gaps, even though Outlook was prompting us for MFA. We saw that if we're able to get a refresh token for another service, if we're able to use to get a refresh token for another service, then we can use that refresh token to get an access token for the service that we want to access that is actually subject to MFA and bypass that requirement completely. So in the end, we're able to get the emails for this user here. So in terms of detecting token tactics v2, one of the things to note is that actually this uses some pretty standard authentication flows. So in terms of behavior-based detection, this can be a little bit tricky. Obviously, if you've got people just using the commodity hacking tools and they're not changing any user agent values, then that's potentially something that can allow us to detect them. We can issue the curl command there and extract all the user agents that Token Tactics will use when it sends requests to the various endpoints. These user agents also are actually very specific, and you would not find those in real environments, in your own environments either. So we can actually use that those user agents to create the KQL below. So we can check this out in Sentinel actually together.
Blue
So
teaming.
if we go to Sentinel,
Let's do some blue teaming. I will protect you, computer.
there we go. And so you should hopefully see Sentinel there. That is in the NBT1 log analytics workspace. And this is so Sentinel. Many of you will obviously be familiar with this already. We can paste in our KQL there. So this is obviously looking for all these user agents inside in the AAD non-interactive user sign-in log. So let's go ahead and run that. Okay, so in the last 24 hours, then
what happened, man? We gotta know.
We see that token tactics has been used in this environment, specifically with Marcus, Ashraf, Lena, and Sunita. So that is very interesting with various user agents there as well. So this is something that if you search for, if someone is kind of using commodity hacking tools in your environment and they're not changing the default user agents, then this is a way to test it, a way to detect it. But obviously, it's a very brittle detection. All we need to do is change the user agents, and then suddenly we are not detecting the malicious activity. I mean, if we check out some of these requests, query detail, then yeah, there's not too much that we can use really to see if we can also check the sign-in logs and have a look at the request detail as well. Okay, so as we saw, there were multiple requests containing user agents that are associated with Token Tactics v2. In terms of offensive security professionals, then what are some OPSEC considerations to evade Token Tactics v2 detection? We can try to change the default user agent values. This is like a very simple thing that we can do
Keep
that
cycling that.
will completely break any really brittle detections that are based on user agents. We can try to profile the device platforms and browsers in use by the target company, and also try to create a user agent that blends in there. It's also worth noting that Token Tactics v2 also supports the device and browser parameters. And hint, this may be useful later, that can allow us to blend in with the target environment or to bypass MFA as well. So I think
Device.
there will take like a 5 minute, actually 5 minute break. Yeah, we'll take like a how are we doing for time? We're doing okay. Let's take a 10-minute break. We've got to go through, we've got a lot of stuff to go through in terms of Azure and M365, and we'll review scuba gear and stuff like that as well. But I think for now, let's take like a 5 to 10 minute break, and then we'll come back we'll come back in let's say 5 minutes. Okay, folks, let's get started. So we are gonna have a look in Azure and M365 how we can harden it against intrusion. So aside from the massive scalability and flexibility of the cloud, then another important aspect is the fix once, fix for everyone nature of security in the cloud, which is amazing. You know, rather than having to rely on everyone to manually update their on-premises Active Directory environments in the case of a really critical security issue, then the cloud really is fix once, fix for everyone. So however, there is the assumption that we can really lift and shift our existing on-premises applications, data, and workflows to the cloud, where it will just be secure by default. The reality is that we actually need to change many of the default settings in Azure, in AWS and GCP to strengthen our security posture and protect against intrusion and ransomware attacks. And so we'll cover some of those settings now. So one of the things that we can check, this isn't something that is reported by Scuba Gear, unfortunately, although it is related to Entra in terms of subscriptions leaving the Entra tenant. This is something that we would have to check manually. This specific setting here is if you click on subscriptions and then click manage policies, you'll see the settings that control which users are allowed to bring subscriptions into the tenant and also remove subscriptions from the tenant. And so if you get in your Azure environment or in your client's Azure environment, if there are any user accounts that ever got compromised and found their way onto the darknet or whatever, someone who is interested in crypto mining or maybe call scamming, or whatever their motivation, if they just needed someone's Azure account to try and make money for themselves nefariously, then they'll try and do that. What this allows, so by default, this is the default setting. So anyone in your tenant is able to bring a subscription in. And so, for example, if you're allowed to, if you allow external users to kind of come into your tenant, for example, or you allow your existing tenant users to maybe join into other tenants or whatever, they can bring in a new subscription and register and associate that with your Microsoft Entra tenant, and you will then become the subscription owner. So this is a super important thing to make sure is set to permit no one. Otherwise, in the space of hours or days, you might be looking at thousands of costs in Azure. Yeah. So we can also check Microsoft 365, actually, which is admin.microsoft.com. And we have a bunch of different admin portals as well. So we just take a look at some of those. But also in Azure, it's fine. So if we go to Microsoft Entra and then down to security, nope, sorry. User settings. There we go. So here we see that by default, users can register applications. This is something that is potentially abusable if a threat actor gains access to your tenant and they compromise a user, and this setting is enabled, they can try to create an app and then look to phish other users in the tenants and perform like a consent attack where it requests the targeted users to consent to the app for
Wow.
certain permissions.
Wow.
Once the user approves then and really consents, then we can use the app to interact with resources as that user, as the target user. And so that's a way potentially that threat actors could look to move laterally in an Azure environment as well, using this setting for register applications. Let's cancel that. If we go to the admin center here as well, and then go to all admin centers, we can see the admin centers for kind of all Microsoft services there, such as Teams, SharePoint. So, you can control how users can share data outside your organization and stuff like that. But in terms of the Power Platform, we can look at
Power apps.
Power Apps and Power Automate.
Power apps. Wow.
And go
That's
to settings. That's a little bit small, so let's see if we can increase that size. There we go. So in this case, trial environment assignments, where it says control who can create and manage trial environments. This is currently set to everyone, so everyone can potentially create this trial environment. This is potentially abusable if the user is able to create a Power Platform trial environment and then interact with the target tenant using that environment. This is a way that they can potentially exfiltrate data from M365 and from your tenant using such a trial environment. So that's something that's worth keeping in mind as well. And then another thing that is really important to consider in terms of security issues is your admin users, of course. So we can sync our users by whether they're on premises. We can sort our users whether they're on premises sync. So let's add a filter for that. On premises sync enabled, apply. And then these are the users here that have been synced from on-premises Active Directory, either using password hash synchronization or pass-through authentication, or maybe seamless single sign-on is enabled as well. So if we had any domain admins here, that would obviously be a very bad day, because potentially any compromise in Active Directory would mean that those users would be able to so these users, if they're like global administrators in this Entra environment, if any of their Active Directory accounts were compromised, then threat actors could move to the cloud and take over Azure as well. So really the best thing to do is, if they are privileged global administrators, to have cloud-only accounts that are not
synced with Active Directory. We'll quickly check out the Microsoft Entra Connect settings as well. So we see in this environment, then the sync status is enabled. The password hash sync is enabled. The last sync was more than 1 day ago. So that's probably needs checking out. Seamless single sign-on, however, is disabled. This is, I'd say often, it's, can sometimes be found enabled. And that's something that there are various tools that you can use to abuse that as well, to gain access, to move laterally from on-premises AD to the cloud. One of those being Seamless Pass. This one here. So feel free to check that out as well. It's a nice thing to play with. We might do a lab on this as well, I guess. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to show you folks was scuba gear. So let's check it out. Okay, so hopefully you folks can see that. This is a secure cloud business applications report for M365. So it includes Entra ID, Microsoft 365 Defender, Exchange Online, Microsoft Power Platform, SharePoint Online, and also Microsoft Teams. This was run a few days ago, so it's pretty current. And we can check out some of the findings as well. So legacy authentication is still enabled in this tenant. Users detected as high risk shall automatically be blocked. We don't have a conditional access policy for that, so that shows as a fail. Phishing resistant MFA shall be enforced for all users. This is something that is very important. Obviously, we've got a lab on Evil Jinx, which is an adversary in the middle framework, and it's really good for phishing
Phishing-resistant
and
information.
traditional software OTPs or hardware OTPs are not resilient against this type of attack, because you can just put in your code and then we'll intercept the code and get the cookies and the password and stuff like that. So instead, we should use like FIDO2 security keys, and they are more phishing resistant.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that is what else we got? SharePoint Online. Let's see. External sharing for SharePoint shall be limited to existing guests or only people in your organization. So this really is like anyone in the organization can share SharePoint data externally, and this may be a very bad thing for your organization if it deals with very sensitive data. And so, yeah, when you're doing an assessment for M365 or Entra, then it's definitely worth checking out Scuba. It does have some blind spots. For example, the subscription settings in terms of who can bring in subscriptions and stuff like that. So yeah, it's worth using this in combination with manual review as well, and kind of putting together your own checklist. Okay, folks, so that was the kind of workshop in a nutshell. We have a CTF coming now as well. Just wanted to give a very quick overview
Let's
of
do
boot camps and
this.
certifications. Really, we offer hands-on boot camps in attacking and defending in the cloud. And the format we do it is that we have 4 weekly sessions, and all the live sessions are instructor led. They are 4 hours long. You get access to the cohort who look to all do it together, so you have that kind of accountability and help of your peers as well. The focus of our boot camps is really we want to showcase the how and the why. We want to get hands-on as much as possible, learn trending techniques and tradecraft used by real threat actors, and how we can detect this tradecraft as well. So the focus really is more purple team. In the boot camps, we learn how to audit Azure, Microsoft 365, and AWS environments, and also soon GCP and Google Workspace. Simulate compromise and also respond to threats using various cloud native security tools. And that's the URL there. So
Jay.
bootcamps.polylabs.io, and we have the MCRTP and the ACRTP bootcamp. Yeah, as mentioned, the realistic labs feature actual configurations and also involve exploiting active users. So with exploiting active users, you're more likely to face that on a red team engagement. With feature configurations, this is more so what you would exploit during a pen test or a security assessment. We'll kind of cover all approaches in the boot camps. After you've completed the bootcamp and also the capstone CTF at the end of the bootcamp, you would be ready to prove your skills in the exam. So just to very quickly summarize, what do you get? You get lifetime access to what I believe is probably the largest Azure and AWS environments in the world, at least that I know of in terms of for learning security. You get lifetime access to the custom content that's in the boot camps. You also get access to the associated structured learning paths, the Discord channels, the cohort, and all materials. So all of that is lifetime access. You get 2 attempts for the exam, either the MCRTP or the ACRTP, and they are, I wouldn't say they were easy, but they are credible, I would say, and should help with getting roles for Azure and AWS security. The bootcamps also give you 45 days platform access to all labs, so not just the Azure labs, not just the AWS labs, but also all of the labs as well. So Google, AWS, and Azure as well, if you have time to go through them all. We are very happy to give you a 20% discount on the MCRTP or ACRTP bootcamp with the code CloudGhost20. So I will put that in the channel now as well. Just so you folks have that, and that will give you 20% off completely.
That's a good deal, man. %20 less of 100% is a
Okay.
great deal.
So now it's time for the CTF, so the fun stuff. This is the capture the flag portion of the workshop, and we'll kind of give half an hour for this or how long, but to be honest with you, this will be always on. So once you have access to it, you can keep access to it. If you feel like you can't go through it now, don't worry, we have some time. You'll have some time, throughout the week, over the weekend, or whenever you can. So the CTF winner gets an annual subscription to Pwn Labs, which gives access to all labs and cyber ranges. And they will also win a voucher for the GCRTP when it launches in July. So good luck. The foothold for the capture the flag is a successful password spray has revealed valid credentials for a mega big tech engineer. Can you get us access to any of their Azure resources? And so the flag for this is inside an Azure resource. And this is the starting credential. So Lena Mayer at megabigtech.com with the very predictable password megabigtech. So folks, good luck on this. If you have any questions as well, feel free to shout.
Hmm, interesting. At least we got a refresh. So either we're going to use Management Microsoft or Graph Microsoft. Go ahead and get this Graph Microsoft bad boy from over here. Um, and so we have Graph. But did we get a management token?
I'm going to provide you folks with a hint as well.
Management Microsoft.
And if you get the flag first, let me know, DM me.
Microsoft. Hidden page. Private page.
Hey folks, while the CTF is ongoing, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, I'll be in Discord. If you have any queries about any of the content today, or you just want to ask some questions. But yeah, a really massive thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the CTF and have a great rest of the week ahead.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seriously. Oh wow. Too many people are doing it. Private file. It's a private page, not a file. So it is not SharePoint. And we can't even get shared drive. We can't get OneDrive. Private page. Yeah, but where's my thing? Here, what we're gonna put is crazy. Units. Come on. Lena. Any other Lena? Lena Meyer. So Lena Meyer, I know that she's blocking management. Who does Azure Services Management? We simply can't use management. She's an automation engineer. She has no groups. Automation engineer. It's tough. Yes. What is this a thing? Get a member of. Uh, hmm. Crazy. What if there's something else? So we have graph, we have management, then we have all the Microsoft stuff. includes. Sure. Legal app. Oh my god, it's a real app. No way. Oh wow. Oh, damn, I was close, but it is what it is. The homie got it first. He got it about 2 minutes before me, but it is what it is. About 1 minute before me. I don't get why I just discounted the portal. I just didn't even care to get into the portal. Well, if this guy's a genius, I don't think he used the portal. I think he just probably enumerated the apps or something. So what do we do? We are going to do something. Well, that is the so I hope you guys enjoyed that workshop, and take a look at my other videos and like subscribe and stuff. So I will see you guys all later. Thank you very much for watching. And if you want to talk about security or about anything, then please let me know, and please message me and follow. Thank you very much. See you.